inside America's boardrooms. The informational show for board members and corporate secretaries. Brought to you with knowledge partners NASDAQ, the Center for Audit Quality, and PwC. Along with content contributors Equilar, Meridian Compensation Partners, Wilson Sonsini Goodrich and Rosati, R.R. Donnelly, and the Society of Corporate Secretaries and Governance Professionals.
Welcome to the NASDAQ market site here at Times Square, New York, and to this special edition of Inside America's Boardrooms. My name is Ty Francis. I'm the Executive Vice President of the Ethisphere Institute and Group Publisher. And today, you'll be disappointed to see that TK Kerstetter is not sitting in this seat. However, no fear, my guest today is a friend, former colleague, and someone who's made an enormous contribution to making our boards more effective, TK Kerstetter. Welcome, TK.
How about that? I just wanted to switch seats, and I've always been told that when you're in the guest seat, you get to talk more.
Well, TK, it's an honor to guest host today, and you always taught me that. So I hear you've got a lot on your mind, and you wanted to get your thoughts over to our audience today. So why switch seats?
Well, the first thing that I wanted to talk about was a couple weeks ago, we did a show with PwC talking about their annual corporate director survey. And one of the results in that, based on a question that they asked about whether board members felt that there was directors on the boards that need to be replaced, really sort of took me by surprise. And that was that 39% of the directors said that there was at least one member of their board that should be replaced. 39%, okay, that is no small number. And the most interesting thing about it is I've been involved with this survey for, I don't know, maybe 12 years. And I remember when we came up with this question, and it was always around 30% every year. But to see this increase to 39%, you have to ask the question, why? And if anything, with all that we've been doing with the education and everything around this, you would expect the number to go down. And the reason that these people said was, first and foremost, age. Probably not a big surprise.
Makes sense, yeah.
Second thing was preparedness, which is disappointed. That means that they felt that people are coming to the meetings unprepared. And the third reason was lack of expertise, which is another concerning thing. Age, I understand. The other two, I don't understand. So you have to ask the question, you know, is this a bad sign? Or are directors just more mindful of evaluating their fellow directors? But the fact that the number goes up, this is what concerns me. Number one, is there a lack of leadership, meaning that you know that there's somebody bad in the board, but you don't have the moxie to get rid of them? Right. Okay. Number two, are the evaluations just not being done correctly? Okay, where nobody's being honest, or, you know, that's being done too much in-house. Or three, is there a lousy recruiting process? I mean, are we recruiting in bad directors where we're not making a good decision on the front end? So that to me is pretty telling when the number is, almost 40% of directors feel there's somebody that's not sort of pulling their weight on the board.
So what are you advocating? Are you looking at a more rigorous board evaluation process? Or are you going to go the other end where GE, I think, came out in the last couple of weeks to say that they were going to limit their directors' terms to 15 years?
You know, in the perfect world, it should be board evaluation, okay? If you have a rigorous board evaluation process, age shouldn't matter, term limits shouldn't matter. It should be who's contributing to the process. So while GE, and first of all, GE has always been on the front end of doing sort of the future thing. They've always been sensitive to this. It goes back to the Ben Heinemann days. Right. You know, when he was GC, he did a terrific job of establishing a culture there that says, hey, we have to look at this. We have to understand that the shareholders, or the board represents the shareholders. What should management and the board be doing to make sure that they're bringing that gap close together? So GE the fact that they've went to term limits, even though it's 15 years, some investors would like that shorter. The fact is they're not waiting for the age thing, they're being sensitive to that. In the perfect world, though, you want to have a good board evaluation process. And there's like 3 simple guidelines to that. First of all, at some point in time, you need a facilitator, okay? You need somebody that is going to not be your GC, not be your head of nominating committee, not on the inside, so that somebody has the freedom to do that. You don't know ever if it's being done by a board member, you don't know if they're the problem, okay? Because somebody won't share that. So every 3rd year, every 2nd year, something like that, you need an outside person to do your evaluation. Next is it's somewhere along there in that 3-year period, you need to do a peer-to-peer. Peer-to-peer where I'm evaluating you and you're evaluating me is the only way to change behavior on a director's level. They need to see the comments about how everybody else feels about them. So that's important. And then ultimately, which we just talked about, you need a leader that's going to be able to say, this person is not contributing to the board. I'm going to need to sit down with them, or our group's going to need to sit down with them and let them know that they're not going to be renominated or ask them to leave the board voluntarily.
So talking about boards and how they communicate with each other, another point which is close to our hearts that we've spoken about over the last 5-6 years is shareholder engagement. And I know you've got something you want to talk about.
How many years have I been doing shows where I've been talking about shareholder engagement? But so each year it's growing and growing, but we still see a number of companies that just don't embrace it. And I just don't understand why boards aren't taking more advantage of the opportunity to do that. And when you look at a board and understand how investors feel. If I'm investing, and I use this on my own, I want to meet the CEO, I want to meet the board. I can tell with a couple questions whether that individual gets it or not, whether they understand what their duties are and their core duties. All I want to have is that experience of understanding that individuals get that. Investors are the same way. They're investing hundreds of millions of dollars as an institutional investor. They just want to have the understanding to have, to know that this group gets it.
And that's something you're not going to see on a proxy statement.
You won't see it on a proxy statement. The annual meetings, rarely do directors participate. And there's a reason why outside counsels and a lot are nervous in putting directors in front of people, investors, because sometimes certain single-minded investors that really don't care about the long-term value try and focus in on directors or embarrass directors or make them try and look silly. And I understand how the live things can sometimes get away with you, from you. But the point is, listen, the director is meant to represent the shareholder. You mean we shouldn't have a conversation with the shareholders that represent us? And if somebody's buying in the tens of millions of dollars worth of stock, we can't let them know who's representing them. So the logic of that says, don't stand in the way of that. Embrace it. Make sure that you're going to, take advantage of it versus duck it.
When you're looking at boards now, do you think they have the tools?
Boards on the whole, I don't mean to be on this side to slam boards. If anything, I get accused of being too pro-management, in the process. At the same time, this is not rocket science. Most of the boards are doing very well and understand everything. So that to me really isn't the issue. The issue is there's just some boards that lack leadership, and it shows, and it just shows very plainly. So I really appreciate this opportunity of you having me as your guest. And Ty, because of that, I think it's only appropriate that you let our audience know what's happening in Ethisphere, an organization that certainly has made great strides. And I always look forward to the most ethical companies list. So.
Well, it's going to be a big year this year. It's our 10th anniversary for our world's most ethical index. and our Global Ethics Summit. That all happens in March 8th, 9th, and 10th of this year in Times Square in New York. Actually, it's at the Grand Hyatt. We are expanding our global reach. We have events this year in Toronto, Sao Paulo, Singapore, Hong Kong, Kuala Lumpur, London, Paris, and even the UAE. So it's a big year for us. The world's most ethical companies, 10-year anniversary is very important. It's a great community. I think between that community, it's 6.2 million employees, $2 trillion in revenue, and $4 trillion in asset cap. And I think, and I'm pretty sure, that the world's most ethical index has outperformed the MSCI All World Index for the last 8 years consistently. So it's important for us, and it's going to be a great year. TK, I'd like to thank you for inviting me down to guest host this show today. It's been a great opportunity, and I'm sure everyone watching the show has really enjoyed hearing your insights to shareholder engagement and board term limits. So that's it for this edition of Inside America's Boardrooms. My name is Ty Francis. TK will be sitting here this time next week, so don't worry, and we hope you all tune in. Thank you.
Join us again next week for Inside America's Boardrooms. Brought to you with Knowledge Partners, NASDAQ, the Center for Audit Quality, and PwC. Along with content contributors Equilar, Meridian Compensation Partners, Wilson Sonsini Goodrich and Rosati, R.R. Donnelly, and the Society of Corporate Secretaries and Governance Professionals.